Saturday proved that Ole Miss can win the national title this year. Yep, I said it.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there. I'm your host, Stephen Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network in the entire world. That is all because of you. Thank you. On today's show, we're going to talk about the college football playoff quarterfinals and the matchups we all care about, including Ole Miss versus Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. We'll talk about where we're leaning 9 or 10 days out. Next, we will look at the debut of Pete Golding had as a head coach, how he proved he's going to be just as elite on the field as he's been off of it. It was actually a very good field game for Pete, and that is something that we should all be excited about. But first, we're going to talk about the elephant in the room, and that is this Ole Miss football team can win the national title. And with a win in the Sugar Bowl, they may be the favorite to do so, even though they're locked into the hard side of the bracket. We will talk about all of that, all of this and more on today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Remember, we're free and available in all the podcast apps and on YouTube, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. This Ole Miss team can win the national title. They proved that over the weekend. We had some doomsday people going into it. It's like, what if Ole Miss just looks terrible offensively without Lane Kiffin and all of that stuff? And Ole Miss just put all of that to bed. They're literally a sack fumble from the 5-yard line from outscoring what they did against Tulane earlier in the year. It was a bloodletting. It was a beatdown. It's a game where Ole Miss, if they wanted to score 70 points, could have. They had all the backups in all of the fourth quarter. It was a beatdown, period, plain and simple. And looking at that, the rhythm that Ole Miss had, even though they'd only played one game over about the last 5 weeks, the Egg Bowl, Thanksgiving week, is the only game that they have played. I think it was 2 weeks before the Egg Bowl was the Florida game. So you take the bye week, you take the Mississippi State game, you take the conference championship game weekend. There's been a good bit of time. And Ole Miss, for pretty much, came out clicking on all cylinders. They came out pissed off. They came out as a football team on a mission and completely put Tulane to the sword. This was a team that was motivated. This is a team that feels disrespected. Nick Saban talked about disrespect, dissing players is something that gets the motivation up for the modern generation of players more than anything else. This whole football team feels disrespected because what went on in November and on into the beginning of December. This Ole Miss football team can win the national championship. And if they beat Georgia, they might be the favorites to do so. Now, Ohio State's good. I'm not saying they're not. Every team in a 12-team playoff is good. Yes, including Tulane and James Madison. Let's not act like they're bad. They want to do why are we letting the G5 teams in? No, if you make it into the playoffs, you're good. You're a good team. And you did not make a bowl game, but claiming you can beat somebody in the playoffs just because they're G5, you're lying to yourself. You want to do whatever you need to do to make yourself feel better, you are lying to yourself. Tulane was a good team. They were a motivated team. They actually schemed fairly well going into that game. Ole Miss's defense was able to handle Tulane in any situation where they knew it was coming. The best chance that Tulane had in that game was scoring on an explosive play on first down. They had to fool Ole Miss's defense. Because if Ole Miss and their defense knew what you were going to do, you didn't have any chance. And this is with Tulane gaining 400 yards and Jake Retzlaff throwing for 300. I'm willing to say if Ole Miss knew what you were doing, you didn't have a chance. To put that in perspective, Tulane had 2 plays to gain a half a yard on a quarterback sneak and couldn't do it because Ole Miss knew that it was coming that way. Will Eccles, by the way, is going to be a Walter Nolan level monster next season. He's already really, really good. He is going to be a monster next season. Everybody needs to get ready for that. He's coming back to Ole Miss. But this Ole Miss team in the Tulane game, there were a lot of really good coaching decisions. We're going to talk about Pete Golding in the next segment. We're going to talk about some of those decisions and where they came down the pike. Ole Miss may have been a plus factor on game day coaching. Lane's biggest strength, as I've always said, has been roster building. That's been his number one strength. You can go back and listen to my shows. I've said that multiple times. That is his secret sauce of what's happening. He is really good at finding players in places other than high school recruiting because he hates the high school recruit. Hates it. Hates it with the fire of 1,000 suns. If he could do the same thing that Deion Sanders does and says he's too famous to recruit, he would do that. But Pete Golding, the way he functioned on game day makes you kind of get the warm and fuzzies. And when you look at DJ Durkin, whenever he was head coach and defensive coordinator, Auburn's defense struggled that day. That was the day they gave up like 42 points to Vanderbilt. So it was difficult. This was the first game as the head coach and the defensive coordinator. Ole Miss's defense may have gave up some yards, but they didn't give up yards when it mattered. Ole Miss has the ability to beat Georgia, okay? Everybody's going to point out this, like Ole Miss can win the national championship. They're in the same size bracket, same side of the bracket as the Georgia Bulldogs and the Ohio State Buckeyes. Well, Ole Miss was a 4th and 2 away from beating Georgia. And what I mean by that, Ole Miss was up by 9 on Georgia's 40-yard line with the running back tackled 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage, just getting to the ground. And you get the ball back after scoring on your previous 5 touchdown drives. And we all know about stop 4th downs being the biggest momentum swing out there. Ole Miss goes down the field, scores a touchdown. You're up by 16 and the game's over essentially at that point. So that's what I mean by Ole Miss was a 4th and 2 away from beating Georgia in Athens. This game's going to be in the Sugar Bowl. This is going to be a game that's probably 60% Ole Miss fans. Heck, Ole Miss fans probably going to take out a second mortgage just to follow this team's run through the college football playoffs. The Sugar Bowl is a special place to Ole Miss. This is the 11th trip to the Sugar Bowl that Ole Miss has made. 3rd in like the last 10 years. So I think that the way this is lining up, Trinidad's not going to have a situation where he struggles in the 4th quarter because everything gets juiced up and things kind of get above him. The fans get on him and all of that. When you're not playing where it's 95% Georgia fans, not going to happen. It's going to be a relatively sleepy environment, even though there's going to be some very fired up people in the building just for the lack of numbers that they have in Athens. They shouldn't be able to replicate the atmosphere they had. So Trinidad's going to be fine. You have advantages that you have based off of going to Athens and getting a lot of the advantage that Georgia has shifted over to you. The offense is going to be able to work. Now, Georgia's going to do some stuff to make things hard for you. They're probably one of the most, if not the most talented team in all of college football. They have a way to shut you down. But Ole Miss is a 4th and 2 away. They lost to Georgia on the road by 1 score. Turn that around. In the SEC, by the way, there's several facts that everybody needs to know. First of all, last season in the college football playoff, no team that had a bye won a game. That is because of what we talked about with Bill Flowers. That's because they're going to have a month off. That is because all of the dust that needed to get knocked off hasn't been knocked off. Now you're going to have Ole Miss playing just a week before. They've already knocked that dust off. And second of all, rematches have been played in the Sugar Bowl multiple times. And every time the team that won in the regular season lost in the Sugar Bowl. And that goes back to the 1959 game between Ole Miss and LSU. Billy Cannon's punt return on Halloween night led to a 7-3 victory over Ole Miss. In the Sugar Bowl, there was a rematch. Ole Miss took down LSU 21-0. Same thing happened. The famous Alabama LSU 9-6 game ended up in the Sugar Bowl, and I don't think LSU crossed midfield in that game. Hard to beat a team twice, especially teams that are evenly matched. They're going to come in expecting what they need to do, and Ole Miss is probably coming in to try and combat that because of what happened the last time. All of that tells me that Ole Miss, if they get past Georgia, they have Ohio State. I think the matchup with Ohio State's actually a sneaky good one as far as a highly talented team. Um, I like it. And then you go to the other side of the bracket, Indiana, Alabama, Texas Tech, Oregon, somebody over there. All these teams are good football teams. But if Ole Miss beats the Georgia Bulldogs in the Sugar Bowl, they might be the favorite to win the national championship. Seriously. Should be really fun to see exactly how it goes. Now, there were plenty of doomsday talk about what we might have seen on Saturday's game. But honestly, and I kind of looked pretty normal, even with some strong decision-making mixed in. We'll break all of that down coming up next. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's where live betting with FanDuel and what makes it so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets on the action as it unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is the best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover, or a turnover on downs, which in the Tulane game didn't happen. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as your guys heat up. And you can bet the next touchdown score, drive results, totals, and even more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and now so can you. Do us a favor, like, subscribe, and comment to the video. Subscribe to the podcast on whichever audio podcast you're listening to and give it a 5-star review. It costs absolutely nothing, but it helps keep all of this free. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network in the world. Listen, you already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Ole Miss with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more. All for just $5 a month or $50 per year. Go to lockedonolemiss.supercast.com and check the link down in the show notes below to learn more. All right, so Pete Golding had a really good, I don't know, in basketball coach, they call it floor game, but I guess a field game, essentially, to where he didn't put his foot wrong at any point during the game. Now, he's going to make mistakes because we're all human, and that's what happens. But his first game, he was pretty locked in, including not going for a fourth down and kicking a long field goal that put it from 14-3 up to 17-3. And situationally taken to the point in midfield, it was a 4th and 3, a time that normally Ole Miss goes for it. They took a delay of game and punted the football. There was a couple of good times that winning football was played. I always talk about play like the favorite. Pete Golding played like the favorite. And other than that, he let Charlie Weiss do his thing. He let Joe Judge do his thing. On the defensive side of the ball, they were pretty good. There was some dust, and the best thing that Tulane had was the first down surprise play when they can go 50-50 run or pass, because once Ole Miss knew what Tulane was doing, it was over. If you don't believe me, there was multiple 4th downs, 3rd downs with a quarterback sneak where they didn't even get an inch. Will Eccles was an absolute monster, and he's going to be a monster moving forward. But Pete had a really good game as far as on the field. Listen, there was a sack-caused fumble by Tulane at the end of the first half where Ole Miss was going in to make the score 24-3 at halftime. It ended up being 17-3 because of that, but it was 24-3. It would have been 24-3 here, and last time it was 23-3. So the game ended up 45-10. This game ended up 41-10. It very easily could have been 48-10 or even more, because Ole Miss had the backups in for the last quarter of the game. They just completely dominated Tulane in every aspect of it. Pete Golding, you could tell he actually spent some time under the GOAT And he just coached a fantastic floor game. He coached a very good game of just seemingly didn't give momentum to Tulane, didn't make it to where it was going to be easy for Tulane to kind of get in the game. Even when it was 14-3 and they were sputtering offensively, he still managed to coach it in a way where the big momentum swing didn't happen. That thing that we have seen for multiple times over the last couple of years never happened. And this was the perfect game where something like that could have happened, because Jake Retzloff actually played a pretty good football game. He threw an interception early to Jalen Braxton. He fumbled the ball that was recovered by Kapina Gushigan. But other than those turnovers, he played pretty well, threw for over 300 yards for the game. Pete Golding not giving any oxygen to the Tulane Green Wave is why they couldn't do anything to get in the game. And that's why 14-0 became 14-3. They got back in it. They had some momentum. They were getting some stops. Pete kicked a field goal just to go up by 3 more. 17-3. That took it to halftime. Tulane's like, all right, second half, let's go down, score a touchdown, cut it to 1 score. Ole Miss gets a stop. Ole Miss goes down to score again. It's 24-3. They get another field goal. It's 27-3. A fumble from Jake Retzlaff leads to 34-3, and the route was on. In a lot of ways, it looked like the old Nick Saban games would look like. One of those things to where you were down by 10 points, but it felt like you were down 30. And that's the way it was for the majority of the game. And then once Ole Miss wore down the Tulane Green Wave, they completely took it over. Now, because of that, I have faith. I have a sample size. Now, it's a small sample size, but it's a sample size to look at against the Georgia Bulldogs. Kirby's not going to freak out. Now Pete's not going to freak out. This game isn't going to be lost as the head coach. We all know how, we all joke about big game Lane, how he's acted, to get your popcorn ready, to where he does some impulsive things that gets the team in trouble. That happened back in 2021. While it was a surprise against the Georgia Bulldogs, kicking field goals, taking points, stuff like that because of big game Lane. And then he would just go back into it to where against Florida this year, he went for it 7 times on 4th down. He went for it against Oklahoma on his own 25-yard line, up 10 points on the road. That is what we have been afraid of in the past. And at this point, I have no reason to believe that Pete Golding would make those same mistakes. It looks like he plays it by the books. He looks like he does what we wanted him to do and what we've been calling for multiple years. When you're the favorite, play like you're the favorite. Don't give them oxygen. Don't give them chance. Take away hope. That's the job. You don't want a situation in the 4th quarter where it's a 1-score game where your team can get tight. Pete never allowed that to happen in the biggest game in the history of the University of Mississippi, and AKA, that's the first game that he's ever head coached. There was plenty of opportunities for him to get excited, for him to get over his skis. None of that happened. And that gives me a lot of faith going in the game against the Georgia Bulldogs and potentially the Ohio State Buckeyes and potentially whoever comes out of the other half of the bracket. That makes me think that we don't have to worry about the head coach losing a game, which is a possibility and has been a possibility for the last 6 years. The head coach can absolutely make decisions that ruin your chance to win a game. Doesn't feel like, again, a small sample size, it doesn't feel like at this point that that's something you need to worry about. He's not just a competent football coach, he appears to be a pretty damn good one. So when you look at what Pete Golding did against the Tulane Green Wave, that gives give you excitement for the game in the Sugar Bowl. Now remember, this is important to remember, Pete Golding is from Hammond, Louisiana. That's about an hour up the road from New Orleans on I-55 going south. Whenever you take 55 into New Orleans, I think you go right through Hammond. If you take 59, you go through Slidell. But this is going to be a major game for Pete Golding because that's in his neck of the woods. So Pete Golding coaching in a Sugar Bowl as a head coach against Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs. This is about as ramped up as you can expect. This is about as ramped up as it's going to be potentially for Pete Golding. But I think Pete Golding can beat the Georgia Bulldogs. Pete Golding can do what's necessary to win the game because he does not coach in a way that, I don't know, is hazardous to what's going on from what I've seen from the small sample size as a head coach that we've gotten. But he also has 5 years with the Goats. He understands exactly what needs to be done as well. So in our final segment, we're going to take a look at the college football playoff lines from FanDuel and tell you where we're leaning right now. All of that's coming up next. There's nothing like college football season, tailgates, packed stadiums, and being right there in the middle of it all. The energy, the bands, the moments you'll remember forever. But actually getting tickets, we just went through that at Ole Miss just a couple of days ago. That part used to be frustrating with long queues, logins, and price jumping at checkout. That is why Game Time gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few clicks. The app is incredibly easy to use. I went from browsing to buying tickets in just minutes. Seeing college football tickets starting as low as $25 made it easy to plan a game day trip, and knowing prices include all the fees up front makes the whole process stress-free. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. You know, there's a couple of leans, lines, and locks that we are looking at this weekend. It's really interesting from our partners over at FanDuel Sportsbook. 4 games, quarterfinal games. It's going to be December 31st, New Year's Eve, and New Year's Day. New Year's Days used to be so fun. When you're my age, you know, you'd have the different TVs all in the room together. The second screen experience, that happened way back when. And you would have like the Orange Bowl on NBC and the Sugar Bowl on ABC and the Rose Bowl popping up on ABC as well. It is interesting that all 3 of the networks would have bowls, and on New Year's Day, they were just everywhere. You could pick out exactly what you wanted to watch. But now it's just going to be 3 games because of the college football playoff and 1 game on Friday night. Now, when you look at these lines, it starts off on Friday with the Cotton Bowl. It's on ESPN, New Year's Eve. 6:30 p.m. Central Time, Ohio State and Miami. Ohio State's favored by 9.5 points. If you're wanting to bet on Miami, you get almost 10 points in the game. The question becomes, can Ohio State score, especially by what we saw in the Miami defense-wise? Ohio State against Indiana was not particularly good. How much of that is Ohio State being very mid on offense? How much of that was Indiana being very good on defense? That is the scenario that we're going to play out on New Year's Eve. Again, getting 9.5 points and getting Miami and 9.5 points kind of feels pretty interesting because they are very good on both lines of scrimmage. We talked about the Ole Miss versus Tulane game. It's hard to beat a team when you are not as good on the offensive or defensive line and you're that far down in pass defense. Ohio State's pretty good against the pass, but on the line of scrimmage is Miami. They're going to be able to at least put up a fight. Oregon versus Texas Tech. This is the rare time where the 5 seed is actually favored. Oregon's favored by 1.5. It is on New Year's Day at 11 o'clock Central Time. It's the Orange Bowl, and it is on ESPN, as all of these are on ESPN. I like Texas Tech. I like their defense and their ability to make turnovers happen. We saw the Big 12 championship game and how it could spin out of control from time to time. Texas Tech, I kind of like what's going on there. And this is 2 of the big spenders in all of college football when you can look at the Oregon Ducks and the Texas Tech Red Raiders. 11 o'clock Central Time, the Orange Bowl on ESPN on New Year's Day. That one would be interesting. Alabama versus Indiana in the Rose Bowl. That's at 3 o'clock Central Time on ESPN New Year's Day. Indiana's favored by 6.5 points in this game over Alabama. And I remember the ragtag group in like the 1930s traveling out to the Rose Bowl and playing in the game. That was like the Deep South's introduction to the rest of the country in the Rose Bowl. Indiana, they're making it out to the Rose Bowl for the first time, and it's a long time. It's been a minute. Number one in the entire country. They beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. They're the Big Ten champions. They're out in the Rose Bowl. Alabama, though, has the athletes to affect Indiana in this game, especially on Alabama's defense. This could be a very low-scoring game because of how good of athletes they have on that side of the ball. Alabama, I think, matches up pretty well with the Indiana Hoosiers. And Fernando Mendoza, the Heisman winner, he's got a month off essentially. Alabama has got a month off essentially. Their playing time was about at the same time. So we'll see exactly how that goes. And finally, you got the Ole Miss Rebels versus the Georgia Bulldogs. The Bulldogs right now are 7.5-point favorites. According to FanDuel Sportsbook, it's on New Year's Day, 7 o'clock Central Time. It's the Sugar Bowl, and of course it is on, ESPN. This line is going up, up, up. It's important to remember the first time these two teams played, that is when Ole Miss was doing a lot of the drop 8 coverage stuff, trying to protect their secondary. After the Georgia game, they just said, forget it. We're going to get after the quarterback. We're going to try and make explosives happen. If a bust happens, we're going to live with it. So it's going to come down to Georgia being able to force Ole Miss into bust versus Ole Miss being able to not bust. If Ole Miss doesn't bust and they can cover the guy and all of that, you might have a situation that's weird. And remember, Georgia has not played a football game since like December 4th. So it'll be almost a month at that time frame. And Ole Miss, I don't know, they played a game 2 days ago. So when you look at that, it would be advantage Ole Miss. And then you add into the fact that in the Sugar Bowl, it's going to be about 60% Ole Miss fans, even though they're the road team, because for those who are geographically challenged that are listening to the show, the 3 largest cities in Mississippi are New Orleans, Mobile, and Memphis. We always joke about that. It's not Jackson or anything like that. It's New Orleans, Mobile, and Memphis, and New Orleans is one of those cities. So a lot of Ole Miss fans have very sentimental value when it comes to the Sugar Bowl. Georgia always travels well. I don't say they're not. But when you look at the fact that last year they went to the Sugar Bowl, this year I don't know exactly how well they're going to travel. I do know that Ole Miss fans are going to go down there in numbers. In numbers. Everybody I'm talking to is like, yeah, we're going to the Sugar Bowl. Anybody that can get to New Orleans is getting to New Orleans. And we saw what the atmosphere looked like for Ole Miss in Oxford, Mississippi. But Georgia's favored by 7.5 points in that game. That is going to be very interesting, and it's very hard to beat a team twice, especially in the Sugar Bowl. Everybody that has rematched in the Sugar Bowl from a season game before, the team that lost in the regular season won the Sugar Bowl. That is just the way it is. Anyway, thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to listen. We'll continue to talk about the Ole Miss Georgia game and react to the Ole Miss Tulane game. All of that happened. We got like 10 days of pushing that forward. So thank you for tuning in for that. Make sure you subscribe, follow, and comment on the show. And make sure you get all the latest episodes as well. We're on all the social channels that you check out. And did Locked On Ole Miss make your Spotify Wrapped? Prove it on social media to secure a free month of our brand new Everydayer Club. Just tag our National Locked On Podcast Network account on any social media platform, and we will drop you the code. Be one of the first to join the Everydayer Club to get our favorite show ad-free and exclusive access to the members-only Discord channel. For those of you on your video, we're going to send you to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make sure you find a second listen as well. Locked On SEC, Locked On College Football, All of those are good things. Hotty toddy, everybody. We will see you tomorrow. We're almost to the Sugar Bowl, and it's going to be a massive, massive event. Hotty toddy, everybody.